Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something you encounter every single day. Those online recommendations. The ones that seem to know you better than you know yourself.
It's kind of spooky sometimes, right?
Exactly. But today, we're pulling back the curtain, getting to the heart of how those systems work.
And a lot of you have hints in research, maybe an article about a new recommendation engine that's making waves.
So today, we're taking you straight to the source. A paper from the researchers at Bytedance, the folks behind TikTok, who've built this system they call Monolith.
Monolith has a kind of powerful ring to it.
It does. But before we get into the nuts and bolts, what's the big problem they're tackling? I mean, recommending stuff online can't be that hard, can it?
Well, you got to think about the scale. Millions of users, right?
Yeah, millions.
Each with their own unique tastes. And those tastes, well, they're constantly evolving. It's a huge challenge to get the right thing in front of the right person at the right time.
So like a moving target, basically.
Exactly. And this paper really highlights two key issues that make this so tricky: sparsity and dynamism.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break those down for me, sparsity and dynamism in the world of recommendations.
Sparsity, think of it like this. We often have very limited data about a user's preferences. Like imagine trying to guess someone's favorite food based on knowing they had pizza once.
Not a lot to go on.
Right. And then you layer on dynamism the fact that people's tastes are constantly changing. Today's pizza lover might be all about tacos tomorrow.
So it's like aiming at a blurry, constantly moving target.
Pretty much. And to make things even more complex, the paper also talks about concept drift. Basically, our interests, they're not static. You might be super into a certain topic for a while, and then poof, you've moved on.
Makes sense, we all go through phases, so historical data isn't enough.
Not really. Recommendation systems need to be able to adapt in real time to these shifts in user behavior.
Got it. Monolith, then, is built to tackle these challenges. Massive scale, ever-changing tastes, the works. But how does it actually work? Where do we even begin to unpack something this complex?
Well, a good place to start is with one of Monolith's core innovations, the collisionless embedding table.
Ooh, that sounds technical. Collisionless embedding table. Walk me through it.
All right, so computers, they're great with numbers, right? But they need a way to understand categories, things like user IDs or movie genres. They do this by transforming those categories into a numerical form called embeddings. Think of it like translating your taste in movies into a secret code that the computer can understand.
Okay, I'm with you so far. But where do the collisions come in?
Well, a lot of traditional systems, they use a technique called hashing to store these embeddings in a fixed size table.
Fixed size.
Yeah, so it's kind of like trying to fit all your clothes into a suitcase that's too small.
Uh-oh, sounds like trouble.
Sometimes things get crammed together, and that's where the collisions happen.
So we're mixing up data points, and that messes things up.
Exactly. It's like mixing up ingredients in a recipe. You're not going to get the desired result.
Definitely not. What's Monolith's solution to this data storage dilemma?
They use something called cuckoo hashing, which guarantees no collisions. It's like having a perfectly organized closet where every item has its own designated spot.
No more mismatched socks. But doesn't that use up a ton of memory, keeping everything so organized?
That's a good question. But the researchers behind Monolith, they've got some tricks up their sleeves to keep the system lean and efficient.
Efficiency is key. Spill the beans. What kind of tricks?
First, there's frequency filtering. It ignores data points that show up really rarely. Like imagine cleaning out your closet, haven't worn it in years.
Yeah,
Probably can toss it.
makes sense.
And then they also have expiration dates for embedding, so getting rid of outdated information.
Smart. So it's about being selective and keeping the system running smoothly with only the most relevant data. What else is special about Monolith?
Well, let's talk about real-time training.
Ah, yes. Real-time training. How does Monolith handle that?
They combine batch training for that initial learning with continuous online training. So it's like having a solid foundation of knowledge, but constantly updating it with new information.
So always learning, always adapting.
You got it. It learns from every click, every swipe, every interaction.
That's pretty impressive. But I have to ask, isn't there a danger of overfitting too right now? I mean, what if I go on a cat video binge one afternoon? Will my feed be nothing but fluffy felines forever?
It's a really good point. It's
Yeah.
one of the challenges of real-time training, that potential bias toward what's currently popular.
Mm-hmm.
But Monolith, it tackles this with negative sampling.
Negative sampling. Okay, break it down for me.
So you're way more likely to scroll past something you're not interested in than click on something you are, right? This creates a data imbalance. Negative sampling helps the model learn from those negative interactions, so it doesn't just chase trends.
So learning from both what we click on and what we ignore.
Exactly. It's about creating a more balanced, well-rounded set of recommendations. And then there's another clever technique they use, log odds correction.
Log odds correction. You're losing me a bit here. What is that?
All right, imagine a scale. On one side, we have all the positive examples, things people clicked on. And on the other side, we have the negative examples, the stuff they ignored.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Now, because we have way more negative examples, that scale is going to tip heavily to one side. Log odds correction, it's like adding a weight to the positive side so the model doesn't get overwhelmed by all those negative examples.
So it's about making sure those less popular but potentially more relevant things still have a fighting chance.
Exactly. Now, with all this real-time learning and updating, how do they actually update this massive model without everything crashing? I mean, we're talking about a ton of data being processed constantly.
Yeah, that sounds like a logistical nightmare.
Well, that's where their innovative approach to parameter synchronization comes in. It's about updating the model smoothly without interrupting what the user's doing.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more about this parameter synchronization magic.
It's like updating a huge program while it's still running. You can't just shut everything down, right? You need to make those updates in the background without causing any hiccups.
Yeah, one wrong move and the whole thing could crash.
And Monolith handles this beautifully. They prioritize syncing those parts of the model that change most frequently, like those embeddings we talked about earlier, on a minute-by-minute basis.
It's like a continuous stream of tiny updates, keeping the system humming along.
Precisely.
This is giving me a whole new appreciation for those recommendation boxes. It's incredible how much thought goes into making them work so seamlessly.
It really is. And we've only scratched the surface of what Monolith can do.
I'm already hooked. So far, we've covered collisionless embeddings, real-time training, memory efficiency tricks. What other secrets does this system hold?
One of the most surprising things they found has to do with reliability and real-time updates. Usually you take frequent snapshots of the model to prevent data loss, right? Like backups, just in case something crashes.
Right. Makes sense.
But those snapshots, they can be really computationally expensive, like constantly backing up a huge hard drive.
Yeah, that's got to slow things down.
So the Bytedance team, they took a gamble. They decided to only do a full snapshot once a day.
Once a day. That's a bold move. I think they'd lose a lot of data if something went wrong.
You'd think so, right? But the impact was actually minimal.
Wow, really? How is that even possible?
Well, it comes down to how the data is structured and the nature of Monolith itself. Remember those user-specific features and those slowly changing dense variables we talked about? They're less sensitive to those short-term fluctuations.
So even if some data is lost, the core of the model remains pretty stable.
Exactly. It's like having a really solid foundation that can withstand a few bumps and cracks.
That's a really clever approach. This is all so fascinating. We've uncovered so much about Monolith already. Those collisionless embeddings, the real-time training, those memory-saving tricks, and now this unexpected finding about reliability. But before we wrap up for today, there's one more thing I want to touch on.
Go for it.
It's about how all of this impacts us, the users. I mean, if these systems are getting so good at predicting our behavior, are we losing control over our online experience? Are we just being led around by algorithms?
That's a great question, and one that definitely deserves more exploration.
I think so too. So let's dive deeper into that next time. We'll explore the user experience side of recommendation systems, the balance between personalization and serendipity, and those big questions about choice and control. Join us then.
It's going to be interesting, that's for sure. Welcome back.
We're picking up right where we left off, delving deeper into the world of recommendation systems, those algorithms that are constantly shaping what we see online.
Last time, we got pretty deep into Bytedance's Monolith system.
Yeah, all those innovations, the collisionless embedding tables, or real-time training.
And who could forget that surprising finding about reliability?
Right. And right before the break, we started talking about how all of this technology, this complex algorithms, might be impacting us, the users, in ways we don't even realize.
It's like, are we really in control of our online experience? Or are we just being led around by the recommendations?
Yeah, it's a bit of a rabbit hole to go down, but I think it's an important one.
Absolutely. And one of the big concerns is this idea of the filter bubble, where we're only exposed to content that aligns with our existing preferences.
Like an echo chamber of our own tastes.
Precisely. And if we're only seeing more of the same, we might miss out on discovering something new, something unexpected.
So how do we break out of that bubble? How do we ensure that these systems are enhancing our online experience not limiting it?
Well, one approach is to introduce more randomness into the recommendations. Instead of always getting what the algorithm thinks we want, what if we shake things up a bit?
It's like adding a little spice to the mix.
Exactly. A bit of unpredictability can actually lead to more diverse and engaging experiences.
So it's not just about giving people what they want, but also surprising them with things they didn't even know they were looking for.
Precisely. And there are other techniques that can help promote this idea of serendipity.
Like what?
For example, some systems use collaborative filtering. They recommend items based on what similar users have enjoyed. It's kind of like getting recommendations from a friend who knows your taste, but also has a knack for introducing you to new things.
I love getting recommendations from friends. It's always a gamble, but sometimes you discover something amazing you never would have found on your own.
Exactly. And it highlights another crucial aspect of recommendation systems, the social element. We often rely on recommendations from people we trust, friends, family, online communities,
Yeah, think about how many times you've watched a movie or listened to a song because someone recommended it.
all the time. So incorporating these social signals into recommendation systems can really enhance that sense of community and discovery.
It's like bringing the human element back into the algorithm.
Exactly. So we've got randomness, collaborative filtering, social signals. It seems like there are many ways to make recommendations more serendipitous, to help us break out of those filter bubbles.
It's all about finding that balance between personalization and exploration, between giving people what they want and pushing them a little bit outside of their comfort zone.
And it's an ongoing area of research and development. As these systems continue to evolve, we can expect to see even more creative approaches to this challenge.
This is making me think about my own online habits. I know I'm guilty of falling into those recommendation traps sometimes, just clicking on whatever's put in front of me. But now I'm starting to see how I can be more intentional about my choices.
That's great. It's about being an informed user, understanding how these systems work, so we can take more control of our online experience.
Instead of being a passive passenger, we can be the ones driving the car, choosing where we want to go, what we want to explore.
It's a powerful shift in perspective. And it brings us back to those bigger questions we touched on earlier. If these systems are shaping our online experience to this extent, what does that mean for our understanding of choice, of agency, even of free will?
Yeah, those are big philosophical questions that we need to be having as this technology continues to advance.
Absolutely. We need to think critically about how we want these systems to be designed and used, making sure they're serving us, not manipulating us.
It's like any powerful tool can be used for good or for ill. We need to be the ones guiding it.
Well said.
This deep dive has been so insightful. We've gone from the technical intricacies of Monolith to those broader questions about the user experience and even the philosophy of choice.
And we've just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore in this fascinating field.
And explore we will. But before we go too deep down that rabbit hole, I think it's time to shift gears and tackle another important aspect of recommendation systems: the ethics.
Ethics, that's a big one.
It is. As these systems become more sophisticated, more integrated into our lives, we need to make sure they're being used responsibly and fairly, that they're not perpetuating biases or eroding our privacy.
That's a crucial point. So let's delve into those ethical considerations next. We'll talk about bias, transparency, data privacy, all the important stuff that we need to be thinking about as these technologies continue to evolve.
So much to think about. I really feel like we're standing at the edge of this whole new world of personalization.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it.
But as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious to hear your take on where all of this is going. What's your prediction for the future of recommendation systems?
Well, I think we're going to see them becoming even more integrated into our lives.
Yeah.
Seamlessly woven into our everyday experiences.
All right, even more so than now.
Oh, yeah. Imagine a world where your digital assistant, it doesn't just recommend movies or music, but it also suggests recipes based on what's in your fridge, reminds you about a friend's birthday, even helps you plan your whole vacation.
Wow, that's a whole other level. It's like having a personal assistant who knows you better than you know yourself.
Exactly. And that kind of hyper-personalization, I think it's going to become more and more common as AI technology keeps advancing.
It's exciting, but also a little bit scary. If these systems are gathering so much data about us, how can we be sure it's being used responsibly?
That's the key question, isn't it? It all comes down to ethics and transparency. We need to make sure these systems are designed with safeguards in place to protect our privacy and prevent bias.
And as users, we need to be aware of how these systems work so we can make informed choices about how we interact with them.
Absolutely. It's about finding that balance, right? Embracing the potential of this technology while also being mindful of the risks.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to the complexity of all of this. It's not just about suggesting products or content. It's about shaping our online experience, our access to information, and even our understanding of ourselves.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Recommendation systems, they're not just algorithms. They're reflections of our values, our biases, and our aspirations for the future.
Well said. This has been an incredible conversation, and I'm sure our listeners are just as fascinated by this topic as we are.
I hope so. It's a field that's constantly evolving, and it's going to be exciting to see where it goes from here.
To all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of recommendation systems. We hope you've learned something new, and we encourage you to keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep the conversation going.
Until next time, stay curious.